Now around this side, this wiring, there is, if it's still intact, a little plastic clip that sits back into a bracket on the manifold. That holds it in about here. And we've got a bracket on here, and a little 10mm bolt here. So I'm just going to sit that in place loosely for now, just till we get all this wiring in the right spot. Okay, so we've got this bracket here. Just while it's here, this is my fuel injector rail, so I might just plug that in. And that sits up in these two little sort of holes right here, if I can line things up. That's it. This little green plug here comes down for your variable valve timing valve that's down in here. It's a little bit hard to get to, but can reach through. Let me try and reach through from this angle. It's much easier. It's clipped in place. We've got our brake booster vacuum, so that comes along here. Clip it in place, slides onto there, and it definitely has a clamp. Now around here we've got these couple of earth leads, and there's two bolts that bolt on there. And we've just got this bracket that gets mounted here as well. So we'll mount just going to mount the bracket first. Let's see how we go. Okay, I just do these sorts of things up loosely till I'm confident that I've got everything in the right spot, and I'll do them up tight. And again, it's pretty tough to see. I try and move the camera as best I can for you, but there's often so much stuff in the way, and then if you can get a good view, when I put my hands in here, you can't see anymore. But essentially, I'm just doing up these earth leads here. Now, if you're watching closely, it had a broken clamp on there. I don't have a spring clamp, so we're just going to use one of these, I don't know what they call them, Jubilee clips or something. They're pretty common, particularly being on the thermostat side. I don't like using these on the radiator side because it can crack the radiator spout. That's done up nice and firm. Just going to grab a new filter, and what's interesting is, look, it has like a nice sort of metal frame, but it doesn't have it on the edges like this one does. So I don't know whether that contributes to this. It's actually not a bad filter if we kind of straightened it all back out. It just looks like it's been knocked about a bit. But a new filter's easy and they're cheap, so just chuck it in. Nice. Now we can put this intake back in place. Lined up, clip shut. And we've got our airflow sensor here, a little clip. Put that all back in place. And tighten up this clamp here. And this vent pipe. And just trying to line things up. Now I was worried before about that being really loose on there, but it's actually quite a tight, firm fitting, so I'm happy. Just as I'm double checking a few things, I just don't like the way this clamp's sitting. It's just not sitting nice and straight. Looks a bit better. So I think we're pretty close to checking everything off on top here. We've obviously still got our coils and our oil cap because I haven't got any oil in it yet, but I'm not doing that just yet. I'm going to duck underneath. There's one or two things we need to get sorted underneath, and then we're getting close to the end. Next thing is I want to put a new belt on here, but I have just had the oil plug back in for a while just so it wasn't dripping, but I'm just going to let the last remnants of that old oil just drip out. I'll zip this filter off as well. Because we're going to want a fresh filter, because that oil in there was pretty manky. So I'll let that just drip for a few minutes. While the last of that drips out, I'm just going to replace my belt. Now, those people that were watching closely, if I can find it, this belt had a big worn and damaged section in it, so I've just picked up another belt. Just double check the length's good, so we're happy with that. Now let me just draw a bit of a map of how this all sits here. So down in the front here, we've got our aircon pump. About here, we have our crank. Let's have a look up in here. About here, we have our power steering pump. About here, we have a tensioner. About here, we have a water pump. And then up here, we have our alternator. And the belt goes flat across here, up here, around under that water pump, towards that tensioner. From here, it comes right around the crank, up around there, and back around that power steering pump and back through there. So that's the sort of order or the pattern that we want this belt to be sitting. Up over the tensioner, up around the crank. Just try and give you a bit of a glimpse up in there. Got all the belt just sitting loosely on all the pulleys. Okay, now it's a 14mm up onto our tensioner, so we'll sit that up onto there. Just keeping a little bit of pressure on here. Push the tensioner and just make sure that everything's sitting in place. We're not on our crank correctly here. And just double check all the pulleys. And that's done. Now that's given the few minutes needed just to clean the last of this oil off here. These X-Trails are always pretty manky around here from where people do oil changes. Okay, a bit of oil on the filter surface here. And these aren't filters that you can easily pre-fill at all, just because they're on the side. Everything's just going to run straight back out. Let's run that in. It's got all greasy and I can't do it up tight. Now I'm just looking at my sump plug here. I've got a nice big washer. It looks like I've got some sealing tape and stuff on here, so I want to clean this up. Okay, we don't have too much more dripping out, and with our new washer, and the bolt all cleaned up here, don't think we're going to get any drips once we do this up. Wipe that off. Okay, with that all wiped off now, let's head back up on top.